Hi there, Miss V here. I thought today I'd read you some of Roald Dahl's George's Marvellous Medicine. I've used this book with many of my classes in the past, in year 2, sometimes year 3. But even if your children are younger or older than that, it can still be a really fun, creative book to use with them for reading and for doing side projects and extra learning. So we're going to start with Roald Dahl's George's Marvellous Medicine. I'm going to start with chapter 1 today, and it says chapter 1 is called Grandma. And some of you might already know the story, but the picture on the front is definitely giving me a clue of what George, I presume that's George, might get up to. And it's got some pictures in the front of the characters. And it's called Grandma, the first chapter, so I'm presuming we're going to find out a bit more about Grandma. So let's get started. I'm going shopping in the village, George's mother said to George on Saturday morning. So be a good boy and don't get up to mischief. I wonder, what does mischief mean? Do we know any other words that mean the same as mischief? This was a silly thing to say to a small boy at any time. It immediately made him wonder what sort of mischief he might get up to. And don't forget to give Grandma her medicine at 11 o'clock, the mother said. Then out she went, closing the back door behind her. Grandma, who was dozing in her chair by the window, opened one wicked little eye and said, "Now you heard what your mother said, George. Don't forget my medicine." A wicked eye. So I wonder what kind of character Grandma's going to be. No, Grandma, George said. And just try to behave yourself for once in a while. She's away. Yes, Grandma, George said. George was bored to tears. He hadn't a brother or sister. His father was a farmer and the farm they lived on was miles away from anywhere, so there were never any children to play with. He was tired of staring at pigs and hens and cows and sheep. He was especially tired of having to live in the same house as that grisly old grunion of a grandma. I wonder why Roald Dahl chose the word grisly for grandma there. Looking after her all by himself was hardly the most exciting way to spend a Saturday morning. You make me a nice cup of tea for a start, Grandma said to George. That'll keep you out of mischief for a few minutes. Yes, Grandma, George said. George couldn't help disliking Grandma. She was a selfish, grumpy old woman. She had pale brown teeth and a small, puckered-up mouth like a dog's bottom. How much sugar in your tea today, Grandma? George asked. 1 spoon, she said, and no milk. Most grandmothers are lovely, kind, helpful, old ladies, but not this one. She spent all day and every day sitting in her chair by the window, and she was always complaining, grousing, grouching, grumbling, griping about something or other. I wonder what all those interesting words mean. Never once, even on her best days, had she smiled at George and said, "Well, how are you this morning, George?" Or, "Why don't you and I have a game of snakes and ladders?" Or, "How was school today?" She didn't seem to care about anyone, any other people, only about herself. She was a miserable old grouch. George went into the kitchen and made Grandma the cup of tea with a tea bag. He put 1 spoon of sugar in it and no milk. He stirred the sugar really well and carried the cup into the living room. Grandma sipped the tea. "It's not sweet enough," she said. "Put more sugar in." Can anyone remember why George was so bored? Have a think back. George took the cup back to the kitchen and added another spoonful of sugar. He stirred it again and carried it carefully into Grandma. "Where's the saucer?" she said. "I won't have a cup without a saucer." George fetched her a saucer. "And what about a teaspoon, if you please?" "I've stirred it for you, Grandma. I've stirred it well." "I'll stir my own tea, thank you very much," she said. "Fetch me a teaspoon." George fetched her a teaspoon. Gosh, she's very particular about her tea, isn't she? So that's part of the Grandma chapter. There's lots more to read, but you can carry that on if you've got the book, or have a look online for the next part, or I'll try and do the next chapter with you. So if you're enjoying that book and you've done lots of reading already today, why not try some of these activities? Why not draw Grandma, how she looks in your mind, using the words that Roald Dahl chose to describe her? And then maybe label her with some of those words or some of your own words to describe how she looks. You could write a paragraph, some sentences describing her as well. And then once you've done George's grandma, maybe you could do the same for your grandma or a relative or somebody you love, and compare what's the same about them and what's different. You could write some instructions. George nearly got into big trouble about how he made Grandma's cup of tea. Why don't you write him a recipe or some instructions on what she needs, how to make it, and what he needs to do to make sure she enjoys her tea, and write a list to help him for next time. I hope you've enjoyed the first part of George's Marvellous Medicine. See you soon for some more fun with reading. Thanks for watching.